Hey everybody, it's Ken Pooch Van Druten here. I have a very good friend of mine, Chris Rabold, with me.
What's up, guys?
And, hey, awesome engineer, front of house engineer. He mixes bands like Bruno Mars and Alicia Keys and Kenny Chesney. Those are the ones recently, but just a long list of credits. He's a good friend of mine, and we often chat and just talk on the phone a lot about audio because we love audio and we love talking about it. And so I thought that maybe we could do this kind of as a webinar kind of a thing, or just a chat between him and I that you guys could be a part of, kind of being a fly on the wall as us discussing about things. So anyway, welcome, Chris. How are you?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. I'm pumped about this.
All right,
We've talked about this.
Yeah,
Glad we have a time to do it.
it's pretty well. Yeah. How are you doing in that? By the way, this is a weird
I'm
time.
hanging in there.
I know. Yeah, me too.
I'm like everybody, just trying to take it day by day and filter what information comes in and out, and know that ultimately, we're going to be okay. But it is cool. There is a silver lining to it, that you can see a lot of people out there staying busy by doing stuff like this.
Yeah, for sure. So what I thought we could discuss is, sometimes we just go off on like tangents. So I don't really care if it goes that way, whatever. But I was thinking, a lot of times we talk about drum sounds, and the other day I posted a video about parallel drum bus stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe you could share with the other people, how do you kind of, I don't know, talk us through your drums. First question, what has been, over all your years of experience, what has been your favorite acoustic sounding drum kit? Like, who had it?
Ooh, wow. I'm a sucker for fatter snare drums.
Cool.
I love that sound. That sound reminds me of samples from the classic drum machines from the 80s a lot of times, where they were doing that big fat piff sound. And growing up as a kid, for me, I kind of got screwed because I thought that like Prince and Mutt Lange, Def Leppard, I thought that's how drums sounded. You know what I mean? Because I didn't play as a kid. I hadn't been sitting in a rehearsal room. I thought drums naturally went and bloom, 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 bloom. So it really shaped me. Being a kid of the 80s shaped a lot of the way that I mix now. So to answer your question, for some reason, actually, I just thought with Bruno, I love Eric Hernandez. I love the tuning they get with the toms, and I do love that. We kind of go around the bend and back with snare sounds, but I'm thinking about, there was a guy, Ben with the Fray. I only mixed the Fray for a little while, but he had really classic. I don't even know what they were. Like, they might have been like Black Beauty replicas or something, 6.5-inch fat snares. And those two to me are so easy to mix.
Right.
So anyway, I'm going to go there. I'm going to say he had a sound that immediately every day I was like, thank you,
That's so cool. And that's the truth, right? Like, when we run into drum kits where the drum kit itself sounds amazing, then it makes our job like so much easier,
Absolutely.
Two comments about what you were saying. That sound is so that PCM 70 gated reverb, dude. That's
absolutely.
That's the sound, right?
It does it.
Yeah. It's funny because I look for that PCM 70 gated reverb sound out of plugins. Like, I'll go look to see if they have some sort of version of that, because it is still like one of my favorite kind of snarey reverb tones.
I made a preset on H-Verb one time just called Piff, and that was all it was made to do, was to take snare drums that don't naturally have that to it and just kind of fake. I mean, a lot of people do that. Some short kind of what is that
Yeah,
excitement
right,
around it?
right.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
we'll get into that a little bit more, because I know that you do things kind of similar to me sometimes, where I create, it's not just one reverb on drums, it's a couple of them.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
That kind of tone of kick and snare, having that, and then an overall
Mm-hmm.
bigger tone, whatever. We'll come back to that. But,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other thing that I thought is hilarious is you mentioned Eric. My wife, she's a huge Bruno Mars fan,
Right.
and she all the time, she follows Eric, I guess, on social media. So all the
Yeah.
time she, sends me stuff where she's like, "See, he's talking about Chris again." So it's awesome. It's awesome that
Yeah, I dig it.
Eric Digsy, man. That's
Yeah.
cool. It's always the best when you work with
Likewise.
somebody. You work with somebody that's so killer, right? Um,
And it usually is the drummers that we end up working the closest with too, because that's the one area that requires the most creation and the most to me, the most conversation. Maybe that and like guitar players or something, at least I
Totally.
found. So
No, totally, man. I mean,
yeah.
guitar players too, you always are having that kind of weird conversation about, hey, I don't really like that pedal, or I don't like this tone, or whatever. But it's the same thing with drummers, right? You're like, hey man, Tom 3, can you and oftentimes it's not with the drummer themselves. Like you and I are talking to some drum tech to try to fix it, but eventually we might be having a conversation with the drummer himself. But for me, the absolutely best sounding kit that I've ever heard acoustically was Abe Laboriel Jr., a little drum company called GMS. And he had that kit, way back in the 90s. And dude, I did this record with him and Michael Landau called Raging Honkies, and he had that kit and we used it as a recording kit, and it was just like that. It's one of those things where you like walk up to the drum and you go, that's what drums are supposed to sound like, like acoustically, all I had to do was like literally, I probably could have put up like 2 microphones in front of it and been like, that's it. You know what I mean? That's like the drum.
Right.
So anyway, all you drummers out there, if you're a drummer and not an engineer, if you're checking it out, that's what we're looking for as engineers.
Please, God.
Get yourself together and have a great sounding kit. There's lots of great kits out there, and we've both worked with great artists and guys that have great sounding stuff. But we've also been, I'm sure, in situations with guys kits where you're doing a lot more EQ than you have to.
I'll do so much when I have to and drive myself insane, and then have to come to the intellectual realization that, like, Chris, what you want to have happen here is not going to happen. You know what I mean?
Along in that vein, let's talk a little bit about like mic choices and mic placement, right? Because those are super important. And people always ask me, like, what makes you choose certain microphones for certain things? And for me, it's all about experimentation. Like, I spent years putting different microphones on front of things, and being like, okay, do that. But a lot of it too is talking to my peers. Like, I've had actually you say to me a couple times in conversations, like, hey, have you tried such and such a microphone on whatever? And I'm like, no, I haven't tried that. And then I'll go check it out and be like, you know what? He's totally right. So I guess my point is, as far as choosing microphones, all you guys out there, talk to your peers and talk to your things. For me, microphone choice is like one of the most important things, because it's really the first place that you do EQ. The choices that I make to put in front of a drum kit, I make them so that I don't have to do EQ, if that makes sense.
Correct.
I don't know. Tell us some microphone choices that you typically use on.
I got you. Yeah, I do. I have a pretty nowadays, and I've done the same thing. I've tried every last single microphone under the sun that is common in live sound. Like, I haven't taken out a whole bunch of U87s and put them on the toms, or I haven't gone crazy in that route. I can tell you where I've landed now, for the sake of not going on forever. As much as I want to get away from a 91 in a kick drum, And I just have this thing where I want to, because I know it. Right before we jumped on here, I pulled up the session real quick and I looked at it and I said, what did I use primarily on the kick drum? And I use only the 91. You know, it's super effective for live sound because it's so incredibly fast. And for whatever reason, it just sticks out like nothing else. That being said, I don't know that necessarily is what a kick drum sounds like, nor is that my favorite kick drum sound, but it works great for live sound.
Okay.
So, and I like to think of my input list where there's someone on the other end of the snake, you know, and pretty much everybody. And as we know, our monitor brethren are not always looking for all the frou-frou options that we are. A lot of times they're looking for more. What do we have? 57 on the guitar? Cool. 91 Perfect. On the kick? Cool. You know?
Yeah, totally.
So anyway, typically there's a 91. I like, and this is Driven Tech's Stage Guys Crazy, I still like the SM91. But tonally, it's not that much different from the Beta 91A.
Right.
It was, to me, strikingly different from the Beta 98. But the little cable on the SM, that's a pain in the ass. So I'll finally give in and put in a Beta 91A. The Kick 2, which for some people is out, for me is typically now it's, if the 91's here in the middle of the drum, I used to try to keep the second one here in line, you know, phase wise, not that we can't manipulate that digitally. Here lately, I've gone with this second one. It's in and it's just off, it's a few inches back and it's off of the center of the drum. That second mic has gone, I've used everything and I just have trouble settling on something. I can tell you as of late, it has been, while an RE20 has piqued my curiosity for that kind of disco thump on some of the stuff that I like, wanting to go old school. This, and it's not an expensive mic, this SE, why do I get confused all the time? And I use all their mics. It's an SE Electronics, the V Kick. I don't know. Have you used that?
I haven't, but I had a little bit of a hand in some of the SE other drum mics, but that particular microphone I haven't heard.
Okay. We know how a lot of times with the new kick mic, it's so scooped and it's so clicky and it's so subby that it's almost like walking into Walmart and looking at a wall of TVs or something. You're just like, whoa, they're all so bright. That's amazing. And then you look at them and you're like, that's horrible. Nothing really looks like that.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with kick drum mics. Sometimes they're just too hyped. And after you live with it for a while, you're like, this doesn't even sound like music. That mic, the V Kick, to me has won 2 different shootouts with a drummer that I've worked with, blind shootouts as of late.
Wow.
Where it wasn't, we just found that application specific, knowing the density of the mix, that it was going to work. So anyway, so here lately, that's what I've been doing for my 1 and 2. I've played some with like sub kicks and this and that, and I've never found one live that really works well for me. But I've tried a number of them. So that's typically what's on the kick. On the snare, there's always, if I can get away with it, if it's a big enough tour, we have enough inputs, there's a 57 and there's something taped to it. That's something for me for going on 4 or 5 years has been a Mojave 101 FET, which they don't make anymore.
I know.
And yeah, right. And so contrary to popular belief, when you hear, oh, condenser on a snare drum, you're like, oh, that must be the bright mic. It's really not, because a lot of times, you know, their frequency response is fairly flat. So you don't have, from the 57, you've got this peak at 5K, and then you've got further rises. You don't have that in the condenser. So it typically ends up being the fatter of the mics. I will blend them once I'm sure the phase alignment is properly accomplished or achieved as best as possible. Most times, even though it picks up a ton of hat, here lately, I just use the 101. But 57 still jamming. There's a bunch of good choices. Those are usually, that's kind of it. On the snare bottom, I love an older 414.
Nice.
I love that a bunch. On the hat, man, I'll go anywhere on that. I don't know what it is about those little cheapy AT 450s side address thing. It's because I can get them. It's because I can get them anywhere.
Yeah.
I'll use those. Sometimes they're too hissy. Sometimes they sound like what they are, and they're in that price range. But I like those. On a recent gig I've been doing, I'm like, man, let's just do something older school, and we've been using an SM81.
Really?
because
Oh, see, that's so
I
weird.
know.
Okay, because
Yeah.
all right.
You just have bad memories instantly.
All
Yeah.
right. So, I mean, this is not, I don't want to get into being the, manufacturer hater about, certain things or whatever, but
Right.
that particular
I get it.
microphone, that 81 is just a microphone that you're forced to use it when you're young, right?
Yeah.
Like that's
And we all were.
yeah.
That
So
was
that's
it.
the microphone that they had at the club, and it was used as a hammer. And
Yes.
it's the only condenser they have, and all those kind of things. So it's like literally, I'm traumatized by that microphone. You know
Yes.
what I mean?
I
So
understand. And to be honest with you, I was trying to prove a point to myself. I wanted to try to use a D112 on the kick. I wanted to use an 81. Like I wanted to try to make some of that work.
right.
And yeah. So with the 81 on the hat, well, wait till I tell you what we were using on the ride, which is not that, oh my God, but it's kind of along the same lines of throwing it way back. I get so tired of sizzle, hiss, unnatural high end. And it's very, very, very prevalent in cheaper and not even cheap condenser mics, but mics that we would typically use live in that 1,000 and less range, you know? And it's also very, very common in PA systems. Now I'm talking that like 13K, 12K hiss that I can't stand it. So that was part of the logic there.
I think part of that, let me interrupt you, because I think part of that is speaker technology now is so much better that we're actually hearing that stuff.
We're hearing it.
Those manufacturers never intended those microphones to have information up in there, because when you and I were coming up there, the PA would do 8K if we were lucky. You know what I mean? And now,
totally.
and now there's all the sparkly bits up there. And I think you're starting to see all of that. I think it's because of speaker technology. But anyway,
I agree. I've got a systems engineer I work with often. He's like, I just don't think you like that. I don't think you like that sound. And I'm like, I don't. Like, I'm cutting PAs at 12K all the time. Anyway,
interesting.
So that's how that 81 came about. The 450 to 80, I'll use whatever. I could be talked into a lot. You know what I mean? And that one, a lot of times, I'll turn the hat off if I've got the top snare ungated, which is rare, or the way I do my overheads, a lot of times if it's the right act, there's enough hat in there. So that's a wild card. Toms, I drift to the Beta 98s, and I know those are super polarizing mics, but they, for me, just like the 91, there's that teeny ass little capsule in there. They are so fast. They're so quick to respond. And I know how to shape them that I will drift towards using those almost all the time. Even it's hard to make them sound natural a lot of times. Like, in other words, they stick out, which is cool if that's what you want it to do, but you got to be careful because they'll sound like this element that's unrelated to the kit. So the flip side of that, another gig that I do a lot, we use 421s. Because we have the space. It's an older drummer. He doesn't have 97 cymbals. We can fit him, So I'm a little flexible there. That's where I'll go. Here lately on the ride, I cannot for the life of me make an under ride work. I don't know how to do it. It doesn't sound right to me. It doesn't work. So I've gotten to take a 57 over top, kind of pointed at the bell.
Wow.
And then, anyway, so on the snares, replicate that same mic thing. Usually if there's a snare 2 and 3, it's just 57s. Right. It's usually 2 57s. I don't go quite as ham on those. Then we get to the overheads. And as you know, this is something you and I bonded over. I've started using the Mojave 201s years ago. Yeah. And every now and again, I'll be like, I want to try something different. But for the most part, I can count on those to do the deal. And I keep those equidistant from the snare. I am a believer in that. I try to spread it out. And now that I'm using the override mic, I'm even more conscious of the relationship between those two so that it's not just phase suit. You know what I mean?
Totally.
I think that's it. I'll use a Telefunken M82 sometimes for just like a random. I think it's just because I own them. Like I've got, again, go back to Bruno. Eric's got this big gong drum, and I do put a M82 up, a fist away from the top in it. Yeah. And that works killer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of, I'm thinking of kits I do now. That's sort of that's what if you ask me to make an input list tonight, that is exactly what I'm putting on it.
So the interesting part of that conversation also is kind of what you've already said, is that those are the microphones that you start with in general for any artist, right? Like those are the ones that you know
Right.
before you've even heard the drum kit. You're like, okay, I know this is going to be my input list. Now, of course, you know, you and I, when we show up at rehearsals, we might listen to something and be like, oh man, that microphone is not going to work for that sounding whatever it is, that snare drum or whatever it is. But I think people need to know that there's an arsenal that you kind of build over the years, and along with that, and it's a much longer conversation, but it's like my kick drum is almost always the same for whatever artist, and then the plugins that I used on that kick drum are almost always the same starting, and the console path is almost always the same. Like all of these things I've developed over the years are like, this is my way that I know is going to work, and I know that it works everywhere for the most part. And so I'm always encouraging guys, you know, especially like with plugins, you know, guys, start making your own presets. It's like, I know when I build a console file from scratch and I'm building one offline, I'm pulling in even my plugin chains that are already my, you know, my presets and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to go on that tangent.
To me, and I just to kind of further that, just a touch, you know, I'll do things. You have your own desk, for instance, although sometimes you're not using your desk, you know.
That's true.
But let's say, and you're like me, like we're fairly fluent on different platforms. By and large, we end up in the same spot. And I'll do things, you know, the ergonomics of the layout, regardless of what the genre is, stay the same for me, because it would be no different than if we had a studio. We were fortunate to always work in our own studio. You know, things get bus, they get subbed together, that this ends up here, this ends up. It's important for me for things to end up in the same place. And I mentioned the hi-hat, and as we all know, a hat can be a really tricky thing live, because the absence of hat in a mix creates this really plodding beat.
Interesting.
And it's not musical, and it doesn't move. It's just kind of ones and twos and threes. It doesn't move. It doesn't have any jive. So deciding what to, I'm all night long, I'm thinking that a hat will drive me crazy. And my point of this is I will always keep the hi-hat fader in the first slot to the left bank. Well, it might be on layer 2 or 3 or whatever, because of course, I mean, I don't try to reinvent the wheel. I start with kick drum as I lay out my show. But that hat is always just a quick bank and grab away. And I don't have to, I know where it's the last, I can't not identify it. And I'll ride that constantly.
That's interesting. That's interesting you say that, because so many people, like for instance, will have a drum control group or a VCA, but then they'll also have kick and snare, right? Yeah. Because some people are like chasing kick and snare, but I'm with you. I'm kick, snare, and hat outside of that drum thing, right?
Oh, you know? Yeah, for sure.
So like I am, even the best drummers in the world that are always constant drummers and playing amazingly, you still need to chase them a little bit on, depending on what kind of a song it is. You know what I mean? As far as where relationship of kick, snare, and hat. Yeah, where they are in that.
Yeah.
So,
and I'll get away from. Now I was gonna say I'll get away from the. I'll have my VCAs are simple. They're usually just like player. You know, band track, player, so on and so forth. Then at the end, you get into things like, you know, effects that are always my last VC or whatever. But I'll do something I'm real big on within my drums is everything gets bussed. Meaning, and my thought around that, and that anyway, that keeps me from having the multiple VCAs. But there is a bus. So if I establish a relationship with a snare top and a snare bottom, or if there's multiple mics in whatever the situation is, every time I turn that thing up and down, I don't want to have to grab 3 faders and maintain 6.7 from here and whatever. So I also don't want to put it on just a VCA, because for me, what I do is I call it establishing the relationship. I'll establish the relationship between them to get something that sounds like an actual drum. And I will usually do corrective EQ on those. Sometimes I'll boost. I go back and forth in this technique. More times than not, it's just corrective. And then I'll bust the corrective, meaning subtractive, you know, getting rid of the gnarly stuff.
Totally.
Maybe just a little boost to this or that. Then I'll bust those, and I will then treat that bus usually more aggressively. I'll usually do more processing. Like a lot of times there's just simple gating done on those. Kicks is different. I kind of go at each kick mic sort of hard. But then when they get together in a meaning with processing, but then when like the snare inputs get to a bus, then I'll further the EQ, add more processing. Same thing with toms and kicks. I do the same thing. But anyway, so my idea, overheads, I even do it. I'll everything gets bussed. And then I'm thinking that bus is the sound, not those three mics. Now I'm not going to lie. Of course I go in and go, oh, there's too much snare bottom, but I'll just move the fader. But by and large, I do that. So in that, man, that carries over. I know we're talking about drums. That carries over to everything. Bass guitar, if it has multiple inputs, it's going to a bus. Multiple guitar inputs, it's going to a bus. So that's kind of how I separate it out.
That's awesome.
Ultimately,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No. I was just going to say a lot of times my template, it's not confusing. It's just a lot, but it's done because I don't want 70,000 things to think about it come showtime, or 70,000 things to think about come showtime. I want one, and it's just like committing in the old days where you commit on tape, you'd go, those two sounds, blend them. That's our guitar sound. I try to commit, and then I'm only focusing on one kick fader, one this, one that, as opposed to 20 something inputs.
Well, it keeps your relationships correct though, too, right? Like all your microphone, that's the whole point, right? So for me, it's like when I have, sometimes it depends. Like even Iron Maiden, sometimes one of the guitar players, I have 6 different sources on that guitar, right? So the relationship of that needs to remain the same. I've spent hours like getting the phase relationship between all of those microphones like totally right. Like so much so that even one little half a dB fader bump on one of those 6 inputs will totally destroy the sound. Like you flip it out of phase and make it be weird. So absolutely right. Those 6 for me are buried somewhere. Like I don't really ever touch those most of the time. The thing that I touch day to day is like what you described, the actual overhaul sum of all of those things. So you and I are both on the same page in that regard. Totally. And thanks for clarifying that, because, I spoke to that a little bit on one of my last videos. I was showing my console and my busing through all of that. And I think you made some really good points that may clarify some things for people. And so that was cool. Real quick, we're coming up on a half an hour, and I don't want to make these videos like really longer than a half hour. I want to do a couple of them, but I want to make each one kind of be specific, and somehow we landed into this microphone discussion. I'll just rip through the microphones that I'm using these days, because it's funny, we both, I think, are very similar in how we mix, but we both get there in different ways. You know what I mean? So like, it's like, when you go to Starbucks, like what's your favorite coffee? I mean, mine's going to be different than yours. They're both coffee and they're both really good, but how we got there is different. So real quick, I'll just run through my stuff. I'm a 91 guy, just like you. The center of my kick drum is generally always a 91. The second kick drum mic for me, I usually low pass like all the way down into where it's sub information, right?
Interesting. Okay.
So it doesn't matter to me so much that it's a super great sounding microphone. I just want the oomph out of it. And it has to be a large diaphragm microphone to capture that, right? So for me, lately it's been an M82, but I'm totally down. I use the M82 also. Yeah, for sure. But I'm totally down with an RE20. That's like old school recording. I used to use those all the time. But lately it's been 91 and an M82. Snare drums. I've been doing a lot of drummers lately where there's no room for microphones. Like everything's super tight, right?
I know.
So I really like that M81 SH.
Shorty. I've got a bunch of those.
Yeah. The shorty version of that. I like that on top. And I like 57 on the bottom. And along with that M82 on the top, if I'm going to do a condenser, it depends. I don't do it probably as often as you do. I tend to stick with dynamic microphones only on snare drums. But that doesn't mean that I haven't. There's been a lot of times where I'm like, oh, this drum doesn't have that crack. It needs some help. There's a SE makes a Rupert Neve condenser.
Oh, that
microphone.
condenser.
Yeah.
It looks like it's in traction.
Totally. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's really long, and it's got a huge transformer on it.
I knew you used that before. I was always been meaning to ask you about that.
It's a great sounding, microphone.
Cool.
Also, SE has, I forget, it's a really
VX.
large condenser microphone. It's like the head of it is super big.
Yes. Is it called the 99 or so? I don't want to confuse people out there. I know what you're talking about.
I know.
I'm in Nashville right now, and if it's the one I'm thinking of, guys use it for kick drum here in the studio. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I could see where you could. But it's an amazing, it's a large diaphragm condenser microphone, which is really unusual. And it sounds really good. It's a pencil microphone, large diaphragm, which is unusual.
Oh, interesting. I'm thinking of a different one then.
No, it's like this long and it's like this thick. I mean, it's a big condenser microphone.
Okay.
Anyway, I've used that on snare drum. I've used that Rupert Neve one. Both of those are SE. It's curious to me that for condenser microphones for the top of a snare drum, it's always SE. I don't know. Shout out to them, I guess.
And I see a lot of people using that. People that I'm like, that guy knows what he's doing. The V7X?
Yes. Yeah.
I see that showing up quite a bit.
Not to go on a tangent. No, totally. Not to go on a tangent, but just real quick, have you tried the V7 on vocals? Do you like that on a vocal?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. That's what if I can right now. That's almost a whole other. We could do that.
Man.
One. Yes.
All right. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But to me, that microphone is like, it's like a 58 on steroids. I was like,
it's the gold standard right now.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I agree.
All right. Enough of that. Back to drums real quick.
Back to you. Where are you?
Kick snare.
You just did snare bottom. You did snare bottom, kick snare.
Hat for me is usually two microphones, either that AT side address microphone, which I really like, or lately I've been using a DPA microphone, the 2011 condenser, and
there you go.
I mean, it's like this.
Shorty.
It's a little shorty. And it's pretty good. DPA microphones in general, like I'm about to get to my toms, and toms for me are DPA 4099s.
Wow. And my first question is, how do they not break? I know they sound awesome. I've used them, but they worry me.
Okay,
those things sound incredible.
Yes.
And I use them on horns and
oh my God. Yeah. Those things, like for me, that microphone in general, DPA 4099, you put it in front of something and it just sounds like that something. There's like no coloration. It's super transparent, super like, I don't know. It's just a really great microphone. The pattern of it's super tight too. I don't know. I dig it, but I know what you're saying. It is a microphone that needs to be handled with care. So this is something that maybe a lot of people don't know about you and I, but you and I, even in a stadium band, go and, like, for instance, Iron Maiden, I put the microphones on the drums.
Yeah. I wasn't going to let us get out of here without bringing this point back. Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I've had other situations where I've trusted a tech to put microphones on there, and then I come behind them and check. But it's an important thing, man. Like, people don't understand how important, mic placement is, and making sure that all of your stuff is pointing at all the right things. You can't count on someone else to do that. Mic placement is like totally key. So I just wanted people to know that is something that we both do. We both go up there. I put all the microphones on the our main kit. Me and Tater is the monitor engineer, and we stand up there, and while a tech is running other cable and putting up wedges and that kind of stuff, we are the ones that are miking up the drum kit. And so in that way, I know that those mics are going to be okay. Then on the last song, I send my system tech to the stage, and his whole job like, thank you, good night. He runs up to the drum kit and starts pulling 4099s off.
Yes. Oh yeah, to protect them. Yeah,
to protect them, right? And so that you have to do that with that microphone in particular. Like, you have to have somebody that, puts them on carefully, and then someone that's always there to make sure they're not getting ripped off by the drum tech or whatever.
Yeah, I get it. Smart.
So yeah. Anyway, then quickly, but the other ones, ride cymbal. I'm actually an under ride guy, and after you suggested the Mojave 201s on overheads, which I absolutely love, that's still my absolutely go-to. And it's so funny, dude, is I have probably talked to another 20 dudes who are all now using the Mojave 201.
I know.
So it's your fault, dude. Like, Mojave should be paying you for that.
I love when you see like things like whether it's a tuning song or a piece of gear or a microphone. You're like, oh, look, 30 other people using that now. That's cool.
The legacy of that microphone as an overhead microphone is your fault. No, but seriously, like, if you haven't tried that, the Mojave 201 is by far the best sounding drum kit capture. What I like about that microphone is that it's not a cymbal microphone. It's a drum kit capture microphone. And so I use it more like, even on a huge loud stage like Iron Maiden, it still somehow survives capturing the drums as if it were a room mic kind of. On the ride cymbal, I use it on the ride cymbal as well these days. And so for Nico on drums on Iron Maiden, it's behind his, his ride is like kind of like this, and so it's behind it, kind of right where the bell is. So those are my drum mics, pretty much. Those are my go-to.
Got you. Something neither of us spoke about, because they're not microphones, but they are transducers, is we both use, when we can, at least I think you still do, triggers to open gates. You still doing that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's do another one of these videos. Let's do another one of these videos. I'm going to stop this one. Okay. And cool. Let's have another discussion. If you got a little bit more time, we'll start another discussion. All right, dude. Thank you, Chris. Right. I appreciate you, man. All right. We'll talk to you in a minute. Okay.